December 29th, 1988. And this is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Mr. Rudolph Pluto in Oklahoma City. Where were you born?
I was born in Emigration, Germany.
And when's your birthday?
August 8, 1942.
Who is your father?
My father is Josef Pluto.
And your mother?
Helena Kuschnier, maiden name Pluto. Helena.
E-L-E?
It's Helen in English, but it's Helena.
Oh, okay.
And Joseph is with an F, not P-H.
Oh,
Joseph. That's
okay.
the G.
And what's your mother's maiden name?
Kuschnier.
C?
Kuschnier.
Okay.
And Josef Pluto is my father's name.
What part of Germany were you born?
Emigration would be the eastern side. East side to that time was recognized full Germany, and now it's the east.
Is it East Germany now?
It will be East Germany.
Okay. So you were born during the war?
Right.
Was your father in the war?
Yes.
Would you relate some stories about him, like his basic training or what he did in the war?
My father? Okay. Yeah. Like, you want to go way back a little bit? I can give you stories that was passed down and what I hear from my brother and all of us in the family. We were all lived through this thing on the other side. So if you want to know my dad was inducted in the Wehrmacht in 1941. And all I remember what my mom told me, he was in Mainz, Germany, in Mainz. He also was in the castle up there in Oberwesel, Germany, because by the Rhineland. It was looking over the Rhineland, and they had a tower there of this thing. Then he got into the forces, or into Paris, so he marched into Paris with the German Wehrmacht.
Any specific stories about marching into Paris?
Well, he told us he took pictures. We have pictures of, I think my mom had some pictures of him in Paris, and he took the French, and the French he marched in the French there. He told he didn't like it there too much. Really, he didn't like it. He didn't like the French too much. Anyway, well, they just, he was in the German uniform, and we were in Dornavatra, Romania, as German citizens there. And my mom waited for him all the time, and he wasn't too happy. He was a machine gunner. He was a machine gunner and a cook in the German army. He was a rank of what we call Oberfeldwebel, which was with a rank of a master sergeant, master sergeant. And just the French just didn't like him being there. They just marched in, took over, and in Paris he took many pictures. I know he had pictures there in Paris, but the French were very uncooperative with them, in him. So anywhere he traveled in there, there was some sabotage, sabotage movements.
Robert 76, Robert 90.
Well, anyway, and when the French, he was in a regional, assigned to a regional area in France there, but they just didn't like them being there, and that's why he had a rough time with him. They just did not cooperate with him. He didn't think of it too much of it, because he was ordered there, and then after a while, after being there and stuff, he was put on the machine gun into Normandy, and that's where he was assigned for a long time. He heard of an invasion, in the invasion test coming there, and of the Americans. They knew it was somewhere coming, but he guarded it, and he was set in the machine gunner in one of those caves, you know. And in there, in those caves, it took a four-man team to operate it. Well, those were big machine guns. I don't know what caliber they were. You can always find that out in there. And he always asked, because I had a cousin and an aunt who were in Chicago way before time. He always kept asking the address because he knew that one day, you know, they were gonna invade, and in case he gets captured, he wasn't sure. In case he gets captured, that he gets my cousin and my aunt's address over there. But it just didn't happen. Uh, in the in the meantime, when we were living in Vatra Dorna, they came with speakers and loudspeakers of cars, and they told all German people that are not under the Romanian deal, they have to move back into Germany. Just pack what you have and just start moving back into Germany. So my mom grabbed, I wasn't, it was just still before my time, grabbed what she had, you know, and suitcases in her hand and went back. Well, my mom said grabbed what she had, and so when we went back there with our suitcases and stuff, so we met by the train station. We traveled back into Germany, a Dr. Zhivago style. It was in boxcars, and on the background as we traveled, we heard it just says attention. The loudspeakers kept going down the streets and stuff. Attention, attention! All German settlers must go back. You heard the Soviet tanks, you heard the Soviet artillery, and everything in the background just coming in into the town. They came right in, and you heard them, and so yelled in the Germans. Some that made it, in there. Didn't make it. They were just captured. They came in. The Soviets just came and just were. I mean, it might be offensive, but like animals. They took the women and started, you know, raping them, and took the some took the captive to the children. They took captive to the children, and some held them there. And the others that made it, you just ran and what you had and crammed into these boxcars. Well, they didn't ask you much papers. You know, you had some papers or anything. But as we went, you know, we lost a little account as we went toward into Germany and made it into these things. Well, dysentery, diseases, typhoid, all was undeveloped. Because you were days you traveled from Romania deep into through Eastern Germany. Well, we had partisans groups. They were much against it, and we were German settlers group, you know, going back into our home. So they knew we were trained, so they wanted to get even with us. So when they did this, you know, they got the railroad. They put the explosive before the railroad. They got on top in there, held a knife to my mother's throat, and made her empty valuables, stole suitcases, because they kept blaming us. We are responsible for the war, and some of this. But then a little mile later, it happened, the delay of the train, that the Russians caught up with us. So then now the Russians boarded the train a second time. When they came on the train, they asked who speaks the language of Russian. Of course, my mother speaks 6 languages, and she raised her hand, and of course we had to get off the train and see the commandant there who was in charge. He asked first of all where her husband was, and we told him he was fighting the Americans in Normandy. I mean, he was not fighting yet. He wasn't fighting it, but he was in Normandy. And the talking of an invasion, he says, "What are we doing?" He says, "We are told to go back to Germany." My brother, before all this thing, my brother was in schoolyard, and German officers came in. They had the green uniforms. They were from the Wehrmacht, and they asked for ages 6 to what is it, 12, I think, 6 to 12. And it says to meet about 1 o'clock or 1:30 out in the schoolyard, and there you are in the there you are. They told them in the schoolyard. They took boys and girls also, but the girls were on one side. That you are now belong, and they had letters written to take them to the parents that you have now been drafted into the Hayot, which is the Hitler Youth. And so my brother my brother was shocked, didn't know what it was about, which means you had to go to a summer camp, you had to go on parades, and you were now a member of the Wehrmacht army. And by the time you got the age of 16 to 18, that you will be able to fight and go into the German Wehrmacht and fight into the army, and it's quite an honor. They give you all this stuff. My mom started crying at home. Oh, she has lost a husband now, and what are they doing to her son? And she tried to see the officer, telling that we have a husband in the army, but he would not listen. So he comes home with uniforms. He goes out to the camp, and he describes what a camp was like. In the Hayot, you were out for about 4 weeks as a young boy, sometimes 6 years, and you had to show your courage. So my brother went out and he helped shoot a rifle at an enemy. At that time, you know what enemy comes about. Or you helped load cannons, which a small boy couldn't hold those big shells. And the soldiers slapped him, and directly, and even at one point they helped the bigger boys fire a cannon at an enemy. Then you were at a meeting of some big general came about, on which at that time Rommel came. General Rommel landed with his plane from the Africa Corps, and he was telling me how they used to polish his boots and get his Hayot uniform. I say Hayot, which means Hitler Youth again. In the uniforms up there, and Rommel came. He remembers the drum and bugle corps coming up there, and he comes and shook hands with him. Rommel did from Africa in there, and everyone had to tell a story. This went all the way to Berlin, according to Hitler, all the way to Berlin. How great these boys did courageously in fighting, fought the enemy, that they fired one shot against the enemy and growing up courageously. And they got ribbons and decorated for it, up there. Well, in the meantime, my dad writes, and he's all of a sudden we lost contact. An invasion came, and when the invasion came, all of a sudden he describes on the beach there in Normandy was the fleet. The fleet came by, the American fleets came by, and he got landing. Well, the alert came up there, so he started firing on the American. Of course, he's killing them, I don't know how many he shot down, and kept firing at them. But it happened, something happened, that they broke through, and on these cliffs, as he described when he was on furlough, that they had these American units, they climbed cliffs with hooks, and as they did climb these hooks, they threw grenades into these bunkers there. These grenades killed all of these loaders and wounded him. They thought he was dead. Well, he had somewhere got the address and thought maybe he died, or if he did get in an hospital or something, he still would get wind up with my my cousin or my aunt in Chicago there. But when they came up there, the medics came, and took him into the Westphalia, where they have a big hospital in Germany, into Westphalia. He was treated and released home, and I guess during that time I was being thought of, during that time, and as we traveled, but we left Romania already, and we were reaching, I think, the borders of Poland that time, into there. And a carrier came over. I know that they describe it, motorcycle, handed him new orders. He says, you have to go to the front, and he thought this was it. He's gonna this time be captured by the Americans, but instead he wound up in the east. And he says he got into Poland and got into Poznan, and there was German units retreating. They all asked him which way is he going, and he says he was fighting to go to the Eastern Front. And as he did fight, go to the Eastern Front, the units started surrendering more and more deeper. The Soviets surrounded them. He surrendered, and all he remembers, they ask who knows a profession or anything, and he's a butcher and a carpenter, that's what I remember, and a cook. Well, they sorted him out. They took all the others, and all they said our prisons are overcrowded, and they shot him right on sight. They were shot. All these others, everybody was with shot, and they marched him into with the rest of the Germans that surrendered, and he wound up in the prison camp of Stalingrad. Him there. Well, my mom is now traveling, and we lost contact. We were on those train. In the train, we have she has developed typhoid because it's that type of travel, you know, in these boxcars. I mean, they must have just cramped people in. And she describes she's seeing people at the train stations crossing, a lot of them. In the east, they had these stars around there. They had stars around they have stars on there, and they were marching them out to the concentration camps, to the concentration camps, and she knows they asked them, where are you going? My mom, as they passed by, and they says, we are Jewish. And they marched them up to the concentration. My mom says, so many in rows, column of twos, and they were loaded up on also these cattle cars, the train cars, and they were going out there from a town called Litzmannstadt. There was a big train depot for the Jews, and very dysentery, unsanitary condition there. Termite, lice in these concentration camps. Well, we, the settlers, when they moved out, we settled there till they could get an available train to get us going, so we had to delay over these things. But partisans were pretty active day and night coming in. And if it wasn't partisans, the Soviets came by. Well, I'm giving you just a brief over.
Who were the partisans?
Partisans were guerrilla groups. They were united with the Czechoslovakians.
Were they Germans or?
Not really. They were Polish, Czechoslovakians, Hungarians, and some Romanians, and some were enforced by the Russians, you know, who were they were just similar to your Viet Cong, you know, and they hid in the mountains. But see, these trains that we were on, you know, they knew that they were just against the Germans. So as they were in the against the Germans, they came down from the mountains, and they just robbed everything for their cause.
Ever hear from your father again?
We heard from him in 1960 or 59 or 60. That was the most recent one. We heard through him also when we were, and then after the war through the Red Cross in Germany, and he was went out of the prison camp, you know, told the commander there that he was from really Dornai Vatra. He thought our house was still there in Romania. But the Russians looked at that thing, and he says, oh, well, that's all occupied by us, 100% Romania, no problem. We can sign here and you can go. But what he signed never to leave the country, and he's over there in Romania. But he went to the house where we have, and that's all communists have it, all taken over. So he had to go somewhere else, and we were already we were in Germany by that time. And
so where's your father live now?
Still in Vatra Dorna, Romania. And when my mom, like I says before, coming toward into East Berlin, finally we reached East Berlin. Okay, when we came into East Berlin, East Berlin, like this thing, we saw hundreds or thousands of settlers now. The Soviets just came, I don't know, ahead of them into Berlin. They bopped off and they made a gate. Now you gotta get through. Now none of them could speak Russian. Well, she knew. My mom finally came with my brother, and I was a little baby, you know. There's something else. I was a baby. We got into Berlin, and the friends recognized her, and they came by, and all of a sudden when they recognized her, they says, well, could you help us get across, you know, and stuff. So finally she talked first of all for us, and that took about 3 days, and she got all these refugees across. My mom did, from the east. She spoke Russian to the guy, and that time, that the wall wasn't up yet. It was just bombed out like anything. So you see, we were going to go to my relatives, my uncles in West Germany, which was in the Hannover Braunschweig area and the Thüringer Mountains. But my uncle would just got back from the war, just got back, and he wasn't settled either. We couldn't find him. So all these refugees went across over there, and as they did she helped them, and they were grateful, because for days the Russians kept them onto the east side underground there, right by the border side, and nothing else there. Over there, the government of Germany called my mom again for 2 weeks to go to Berlin after we were settled, to help her with the refugee problem one more time, because she spoke Russian, and the Russians just wouldn't let them go. And so when after the war came, the letter came, and she went back there, and she had to interpret again. And after that, they came by. Well, my dad did most of the fighting in 41, and he fought, what I says, against the French when they came, Americans when they did come in there with that, opened up on him, and then in Normandy he got it, and that's what the other side. My uncle, I think, one of them was a pilot. He was shot down, and he jumped in West Germany, and I had another neighbor of mine that came in after the war, and he Wehrmacht, and he got out of the prison camps, and was caught by the American prison camps there. Well, the Americans came into my town, as I remember that, and up there, and this is some of the things they might not, the Americans might not like it. Now, we have not seen very many, blacks that come in. They came into my towns, and they were not so innocent either. They started, hitting the town, and a lot of women got, also raped and pregnant into the towns they came. Black children come. My relatives I have some relatives in the east, that is, stayed in the east there. They had to put out flags, we are being liberated with the Soviets. And when the Soviets came on that end, of course, they started, and there wasn't, everybody had a Russian child there. Everybody, there wasn't one woman with a Russian child when it came in on the east side. And liberated from what? They just came into with tanks and armaments there. In my town, they came, the British and the Americans came with columns of armaments and everything over there. They got in there, and tanks was being shot down and stuff, and if you wanted anything from tanks, and you just had to go out in the fields. As a boy, I played on tanks off the tracks. I picked up any weapon. American 145s were laying, German weapons were laying in the fields, and for days, dead bodies were there before they came by and cleaned them all up over there. So as a boy, we played on that thing after the war.
What part of Germany was that?
That was already past Helmstedt into my town. That's between Wattenstedt, Lebenstedt, and Salde.
What state is that?
That's in Hannover Braunschweig, über Salzgitter. You could go through. The town Lebenstedt now was Hermann Geringstadt, and it was just artillery and bombings. As I came there, it was all bombed out, grocery stores and nothing in that part there.
Does your mother, did she relate any stories about the bombings?
Oh yeah, we had bombings. I could tell you stories of bombings
Yeah,
there. We had bombings come over, and as I remember, we were walking on the street, and in the east, from going to 30th train station. This was going to Poland, and American planes, as well as the Soviet planes, American planes came over, and we had the sirens going off. And my dad was home on furlough that time too, my dad was home on furlough, and as we walked onto the street, all of a sudden the loudspeaker says, attention, you must air raid shelter. The sirens, a real high siren sounds all over went off, and next thing you know, they went on, the bombing started, America, but this was deep already in the east. The Americans just flew over, past Berlin, and some of these planes got over there east, and German German anti-aircraft, was that stood up there and they fired on them. And when they did finally get it, one of them was shot down into the field as a boy, and we went down to air raid shelters, but it was too late. And my mom and who else was with her? I think my sister. They had to lay under a railroad boxcar, underneath it, till that bombing started. It was just everything just was lighting up. The whole railroad tracks, were bombed out, and rail trains were on fire, and buildings all around was bombed out. And I was with my dad and my brother. We made it to the shelter, and my mom thought, oh, now we got separated or something happened to us over there. But they kept coming, and the pilot supposed to have jumped out, but wasn't caught. Very fortunately. It was an American, and because the plane was in the field, it was an American airplane. All I don't know much about planes. It had a propeller in front. One of them was laying in the, but they flew as far as to the east, that direction. Americans did that. See, they didn't just go to Berlin and back. See, and across the Elbe River, we only thing we saw I saw the first American troops, like in my hometown, with British coming by. I got real scared. They came in there, and they had to take bunkers. In my town was a lot of bunkers of ammunition, and they went in explosions, and they came and blew up these ammunition bunkers. And I was in school, and I got scared because everything just shattered. The British demolition teams came in. And
What did your mother tell you about World War I?
in World War One, my grandfather fought and he was in the German army, the Prussian German army, and he was a engineer, and he was the train taking troops back and forth to the front and the
Was
train.
he an engineer?
Yeah, what they call engineer. And
What was his name?
Kuschnier. His name was Kuschnier. Kuschnier. I can't think of my grandfather's first name. I'll have to call my mom. Kuschnier was his last name. I know that much.
Did you know him?
No, he died from that gunshot wounds. He came home and he died home. He drove the troops home, got home, wounded, and gunshot wounds. But in that house, in that area, they came fighting, and a lot of Russians on horseback, and it's a refuge. And my mom and her mother and stuff helped them. They were wounded, and she helped them coming into the town, and she helped them up there. They were shooting outside, and I know he got wounded with their type of things, and they went out. And my grandfather went out, and his job was just to fight, and then bring troops back or help bringing the cannons on the trains and everything out there to the front in there. He took days out there, so he was an engineer out there. She knows probably a lot more on this thing, because she's seen them out in the fields, where they had them out there, the battlefields, where they came in. Again, it was the Russian troops that we were again familiar with in there, which came in. We hardly saw at that time. We didn't see any Americans. The only Americans we see was on our land. We had mineral water and stuff, and they were buying bottles of mineral water. That was the only Americans we seen. The rest we seen all in the east. But when we crossed Helmstedt, Magdeburg and Helmstedt, well, that's when we got into the Americans. The Americans are there now. And this is when the first real encounter, and when my dad fought them in the war, that's when the first encounter we had over there. And then British came into my town. We had, like I said, after the war, my town had some first black children, and the mother didn't like it, because that was unheard of except in the Olympics that time, 32. And what happened is, when she had her children up there, the mother got real upset with the daughter, and she just took that child and threw it down the second or third floor and killed it in the town. Well, her husband was caught by the Americans. He was in the United States. They brought the ship back. The British caught him, and the Soviets caught him at the same time. So he spent about 4 months in the British and 4 months in the Soviet camp. Then he came home and figured he sees his wife. All of a sudden his wife didn't want to show him he had to baby the mother, but finally when they did show them, there comes another child that's black. And as soon as that evening we come out in the morning, he hung himself. He said we had to come. As a boy, I saw him then, and then they cut him down. They cut him down by the thing in there, and then he hung himself. So all that torture the guy went through in there. And so this was many things. I remember he was just bummed out. You couldn't see nothing. Ledenstedt especially was all bummed out. They had planes and artillery hit that town, and I remember that time hearing an air raid going over one time in that town in there. My mom could probably even more by trains. We were from train to train to train to train through the war in there and the fighting. You could see here outside. One time these guys checked you for your papers, the next time they were outside and being killed.
When did you come? When did you come to this country?
We came in 50, 51, 51, 51.
Remember the trip?
Yes, my my cousin made us papers, but we got it on a ship. We came on a ship. It was called the General Bello, a U.S. type of a merchant marine ship. It was rough. It was watery. I was the only one not sick. Everybody got seasick. It was in December, and on Christmas we came here to New York.
You come to Ellis Island?
There was no more Ellis Island that time. It was just there, but we didn't come to. We came right on the port in there where they had a big open dock, where they had all these people. They checked suitcases, and we couldn't talk English in New York. And I saw the Statue of Liberty at night time. They kept us there for about a day or so on the ship itself. That's all. And I still didn't know what that was. The statue, and we didn't know English that well. And then when we did get off, and it was so cold in New York, in New York, it was just they checked our suitcases, the customs and everything, and then we had a train ticket and a bus. And I remember New York, all these big buildings which I never seen before either. In there, and we went on, and we went by train for about from New York to Chicago. One building, it was snowy, ice, and coming through there, it was just the trip was I don't know how many days. It was about 6 days. 6 days. It was by ship, in big stormy wind there.
When did you come to Oklahoma?
In Oklahoma, I came in 79.
Why'd you move to Oklahoma?
Well, all I remember is Chicago. That's all my cousin got us to, and there was all these crowds of people. So when I did get drafted into the American Army, and one time I knew there was other places. I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky, and when I did get into there, I figured there must be other places or something, because my sister-in-law and my sister and my brother-in-law, which is a Berliner too, he was in Phoenix, Arizona, and then he moved to Arkansas. Well, I thought might go over there and see what they've got going, and I go to Arkansas, but Arkansas was hard with jobs, and so I moved out west, just took up to, and I found jobs out here in Oklahoma.
In Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. It was easier.
Well, I think we covered the first part pretty good. We'll continue a little later.
A little later.
Okay, thank you. Okay. What'd your mother say? Did your mother do any work for the war effort in Germany?
Yeah, all the women did. There was an area commander, which the most a lady was in charge of the area, and they all had to go out, but they did various jobs. You either had to So they had to sew like uniforms and stuff for the soldiers. They had to sew, or they had to, clean around the area, the block area for the streets, or they got to put them into factories nearby. If there was a town in a factory, my mom was sewing and cleaning for the area there, and there was a lady in charge. She was in uniform of the party, and they went over there and they took them and they would clean and sew uniforms, for make fresh uniforms for the soldiers. And like I said, some of them they had a factory and they worked for a musician's factory, and my mom had to be in one of them one day. And mostly I know she did cleaning, and she did cleaning mostly, areas, when soldiers came in, for areas to stay, and also they should have uniforms. They sold with uniforms, and also, like I said, the other one was, a couple of days in the factory. I mean, but they also took children were old enough, even of 8 years, 12 years or so. They took them also in. My brother had to do things too, like this, like him and some other buddy of us remembers digging the trenches or defense lines. When enemy comes, defense lines.
What did your mother have to do in the factory that one day?
That day it was I know she lifted up, and she was telling me she was lifting up heavy steel and lead. That was the ammunitions, I think, ammunitions and stuff. She didn't quite set the explosive in, but I mean it went over conveyor belt and she emptied and lifted it up. But everybody had to do it when called on, because like I said, there was an area and a lady was in charge, and she was calling you in, and you all had to work out there. Or in the camps, where they had the camps, they also made places ready, changed bedding.
Was food rationed during the war?
Yes, it was very much rationed. See, we had no food. My meal, I remember even after when I was about 2 or 3 years old, all I had is lard. There was a lard of something that was reheated and stuff melted down, a piece of bread and coffee. And I was 2 or 3 years old. That's all I had, about good for a good year. Once a day I had coffee. They had coffee, black coffee. My brother and them can tell you that's what my sister, my brother, and even as I was a child, milk was very hard to get by, and we stayed on it with a little piece of bread and some lard over it, and with some all we ate. You had finally in Germany we had stamps, and they were ration stamps, but you're only allowed to go once a week, and so only that's it. And they allowed you maybe a little milk, one would be maybe half a gallon, would be 1/4 of a quart, maybe like this, and that was before 1 week. That's it. So there were days when people were quite hungry, and the lines were big at that time, and then a lot of times you couldn't get it. Like I said, diseases were high. Diseases were high after the bombing. So like if you would visit the East now, you would see all the World War II money. A lot of it hasn't been rebuilt. You would see that now. The holes and the cannons and the bombed out buildings are still there. The plumbing is still there as it was there, and it's contaminated. You would see that today, even today, but you wouldn't have that.
You mentioned people ate sugar beets.
Yes, that came when we came back, when we were there in my hometown then, and people were growing food. See, the Americans, they promised that they will come in and they will build they will help rebuild and open up the supermarkets too. Because I remember airplanes coming in, and they mentioned supplies were coming one day, after the war, but beforehand nothing came, and we were all waiting for it. When they did come, nothing came, they all grew, and sugar beets for some reason grew so plenty on the fields. I don't know, farmers or people just grew them. And you could buy wagon loads. They came in by wagon with lunch of sugar, and that's all they ate. Morning bread, morning lunch and dinner, with a piece of bread maybe or something, and sugar beets. And at the end of the year, or nearly a couple months later, I mean, there was just the hospitals, and in the house, the landlady where we were, from the sugar beats everybody, men, women. She got diabetic, a lot of diabetes. Children in school, I remember they get insulin, but insulin was short, so they all had these diabetes attacks. Passing out right and left, you could see them as there, and that was already while the war was there. You could have it. You see us on there. Black market was heavy. That was real heavy. I mean, you could go all over. I mean, on the train stations or in any town, you saw it real heavy. Like one approached my brother for it. He claimed that he has a lot of American cigarettes, and he opened up his coat pocket and he had every kind of thing under him. And he says American cigarette, but it was all over the black market, and the prices he just asked was outrageous. Now the money declined very much from the war. You had the Reichsmark there, and kept losing its value.
Yeah.
Belgium.
Well,
About the black market. And the money had declined.
okay. Well, because see, the money just lost, and then you were on rations. Down there, you're on rations, and that's what it says. There was just per family and for so many kids, you were allowed to get so much milk, so much groceries, and that's it, once per week. And then all of a sudden, over the radio, it came later on by 12 o'clock noon. If you did have a Reichsmark, which we had one time, we were almost got into that thing, and many families, you had a stack full of them. This time the Reichsmark, it says by 12 o'clock noon you have to exchange this money and get the this was already the Bundesrepublik, to get the other mark in there. If not by after 12 o'clock, that's it. So people got in there, and a lot of people didn't hear the announcement and came, and all of a sudden they went to the store and they still had the Reichsmark, went shopping, and you were out of luck. You couldn't buy anything. Not a penny, and it was all worthless. It just like from 12 o'clock noon and that certain date, which my brother was telling me, because he had a bucket full of it, and if there was a currency, we were pretty well off. All of a sudden, like that, when at 12 o'clock noon, it was worthless. So people had to borrow or work to get the other one till the banks were actually filled, and they only had so much to give. It came all at once, printed, a certain limited, till it circulated more, and well, if you didn't get there in time, that's it. And they're only allowed to give so much anyway. So everybody lost, and you're back to square one again.
When did that take place? When did that happen?
I think it became, I think it was in end of 45 or 46, I think 46, 1946. But my brother and my mom and them were telling me about that thing. We had a bunch of Reichsmarks over there, and it was it. It was worthless then. And so that's it. You couldn't buy nothing. So very fortunately, he learned to be the profession of a baker and stuff, and finally the bakery got itself got itself started, and that was it in there.
Now, where did the family live at this time?
We were living there in Salzgitter, in Leibniz at Zalde. It's called Zalde. It's right in Zalde, between Braunschweig and Salzgitter.
Okay.
And that's where he learned to be a baker at.
What did your mother say about the rise of Hitler? What did your mother say about him in the early days?
In the early days, she remembered from World War I, and she remembered she lost her father and her brother in these other wars and everything else. She heard this stuff going over the radios or broadcast, or way traveled via newspapers and stuff. They telling each other, and she got sad because all of a sudden she says, here the Germans go again. It says we just got done with one war, and she lost so much of her relatives and started crying, and now she has to, there's going to be another war gonna happen, and we're going to lose all of them. I'm going to lose the other husbands, sons, whatever it is. So she was sad about it, in there. As a matter of fact, she had an incident where he got off the train, and where we were at, Hitler got in one town, and he got off a train, and she was there too. I mean, but he didn't. They just, He was in the wagon, he bypassed, and we bypassed each other, you know. The bypassed, he went to one place, and this was in the area, you know. It was after that bombing, you know. They tried to bomb him, but he came by train down there to get escape, you know, for an escape. And he got off the train there, and everybody, you know, who says he's coming, you know, he's coming, you know, he's coming. So make way for the Führer is coming there. And I know they seen him on the street. They went probably a place to where he had security on him, you know. After they seen him out there. The generals went through, and a lot of people, you know, checked you out. But you were Germans. They'll ask you, were you, if anyone is fighting, you know, first of all. That's it. In a bus, when you went in a bus to that time, or on a bus, of course, the disabled fighting the war got first privilege. Soldiers got first privilege, and you got to the end. That's how they were. That's how they were in there. The soldiers. So it was disabled, they fought for the fatherland. They got wounded. Soldiers, if you were in there any time, or they also got to see better seats. You had to stand up for them and give up a seat for them.
What about the Depression in the 20s? How bad was that?
In the 20s, 1926, my mom was she was in Romania that time, and she had a job. I know that much. She had a job working. She worked for a judge in Romania, see, and I was closely toward my dad getting married. So what went on in Germany a lot, my dad, of course, he took up a lot of bills and stuff in that time, you know. But in the 20s was just they said it was just also just as bad in there, you know. The jobs, you had a lot of beggars. See, during that time of Hitler's time, he didn't permit, there was no beggars on the street. Anyone came by. But after the war, they all came back. After the war, there was no beggars there. I mean, after the war, you had a lot of people, you know, with a cup on the corners or playing something out in the markets, but not during that time. He would not permit it. They just soldiers police would pick him up and take him away in a camp. Everybody works. There's no one sitting here. That was the ruling. So when you wouldn't have to worry. You went down the street, you had no beggars there. Like, you know, give me a mark or something. I'm dead during that time.
Did in the late 20s, early 30s, did people think Hitler was good at that time?
Well, they didn't know much about him. They didn't know that much about him where I was. See, I'm speaking further east now. The Germans back then, the word come, they're gonna have someone coming in new. That's what my mom was telling me. She just goes back. They just go back that there was gonna be rumors of war. That's all they said. There's rumors of war going on. And then when he did go into Poland, you know, he went into Poland and stuff. They knew it was gonna get back. And then in Romania, the Germans were all drafted in there that much, but they couldn't say anything anymore. They couldn't say anything anymore. You couldn't say anything anymore. But for a while, you know, that for them, jobs and depressions would go. That would be it. But see, we were out in a country side in with the Germans in Romania, and we have not accepted the Romanian citizenship. We were still with the Germans, so that's why. So a lot of it that time didn't affect us until we got into, you know, the war and into Germany. And this time our land and everything with cattle and that stuff was lost, you know.
Why did you live in Romania?
See, before even the Grand Wars, before the First World War and all that stuff, you know, like you people moved out west, you could move out, you know. You moved out. The Germans moved out, you know. They did not accept the country. You got land and you had settlements. You have German settlement along the Volga Germans. You had the Donau Schwabens, again along the Danube, and all these people migrated all over Europe, you know. And it was alright, you know. The land, things were okay, very healthy, the mineral waters, and you had to, you know, of course, you paid your allegiance to them, and the government didn't bother you over there because it was just, you know, all not that far. I don't know, as the Germans were, so I didn't mind. It was like, I don't know, like you would go out west here and settle somewhere, or like you had the land deals over here. Land rights, like the what do you call these early days in Oklahoma, where you had to settle land.
Yeah, they had the land run and
Well, that's how they had it out.
Yeah.
So we did, we my grandparents did, and from Austria it was easy to get into there. My mom went through there, and she settled there with her. My dad grandfather did and stuff, and then my mom got married there in 1926 over there, and they built their house of stuff and everything. I've seen pictures of it by hand and everything, and so it wasn't bad until that war came. Until this day, and then it separated them. Like I says, he just got a draft notice from the Wehrmacht and reported he was still subject to the draft, fight in the army, and
even though he was in Romania.
yeah, because see, you made it known, and you pay every taxes or anything was known, you paid it to Germany, not to that government, and the Romanian government didn't even mind. So it was a different thing. So he wore the uniforms quite, and I know in First World War was the same way. When they were from Romania down there, they know. My mom tell you about the First World War also. About the First World War, in there when that king was shot there in Yugoslavia and stuff. My grandmother she'll tell you all about these kings and stuff out there. How they got in there, and the Romanian Germans again got in there, but they had to fight against the Prussian German side. If you were Austrian and you fought with the Austrians there, of course, a lot of Austrians moved there too, and that was it. Bukovina, that's what they call it now, Bukovina. That's an area there, and they settled out there. But see, then like I said, when that came out and the Russian Soviets came in, see, they didn't want to get under them because they would be very much killed, tortured, and whatnot. See, everyone had to go back, and so they had, like I said, these little cars with loudspeakers on it. Says all German settlers, I have to go back to Germany.
Do you remember that trip going back to Germany?
Which one? Well, I wasn't. I was in the middle of the war. That's where I was born. I was born there in, like I said, Emanuel Zegen, going from Romania into Germany. See. Deep into Germany, but my mom, just like I said, we traveled in Dr. Zhivago's style, not to carry anything heavy, get what you can, get your valuables what you can, and just go to the train station. And like I said, and at the train station, cattle cars, these cattle cars like the hobos ride on, that's where everybody, hundreds and hundreds of people just went in and they crammed them in. There's no ventilation, no heat. I wasn't born, but my brother was there yet, and my sister was there yet, and they crammed them in, and she was just in. But then, like I said, people, everybody there was no medical teams, nothing, and after a while, with that poor ventilation, dysentery and stuff, you caught diseases. Like my mom caught typhoid down there for a while, typhoid and stuff, and some other diseases came through. She was describing, one time, they stopped through and they couldn't go any further. See, but it wasn't bad because, see, you could stop in a town where it does get off, and where you stayed there for a while, and during the war, and then, of course, you could catch whenever another train like this is available, in cattle cars, you just grab that and went into deep Germany. That's when they were going, and then, of course, if the tracks weren't took them so long to repair those tracks because Americans and partisans and kept bombing and blowing up these railroad tracks. The Americans also were in on it. See, they did not stop only like we say in Berlin. They went as far. They went as far, like I said, they went even as far as the east. Some of them went further. My mom saw it. They went all the way even as far as crossing over into Romania.
Describe a bombing. What's it like to be on the ground?
A bombing as a child, I know I heard the noises. I was shocked. I started crying. It's almost, you compare it like an earthquake. The closest I can describe it is an earthquake. So you hear these sirens. You hear these sirens. They announce every which way. They have loudspeakers and cars. Go to the air raid shelter. Anyone to the nearest air raid shelter, they'll guide you. Then when you come into any town, they'll tell you where the air raid shelters is. and you'll hear a big. There were these propeller jobs. You hear this roaring over on overhead, but then all of a sudden you hear like constant thunder, boom, boom, thunder, and everything shakes. Everything shakes. I mean, even if you were when you were underground, you have found things shaking, like an earthquake. And when you come up there, you see everything, no roofs on buildings knocked out, and then all of a sudden you see everything is burning around you, all fire burning around you, and people you see, sometimes like you take pieces of cars, got hit. You see probably people dead right around you too, all kind of people, women, children died, they couldn't make it. Some of them you could see that, even as a child, you're running, also they're dead, then like if those people working, they'll probably pick them up if they get a chance because so many of them, but everything is just walls will fall down, like an earthquake almost. I could remember, except you'll have humming, a lot of humming, real loud, and then as the planes come lower, and then of course you hear the return gunfire too. That also shakes when you hear the cannons, into the air. You hear the cannons and then boom, that shakes. So you get deaf. You'll get deaf after a while. You hear drums. It's pretty accurate, You get deaf after a while. They'll just come over and they'll blow them, and then if a plane crashes, you'll hear the people. You'll hear the people saying, "There it comes, there it comes." They'll make some of them. They'll watch it go down into the forest, and when it does go down and the forest trees are on fire, there, and fire department and stuff is not very often and used to go on because it has all these buildings to got, so a lot of times the forest will burn. That leaves you more open for cover, under cover, in there. But that's what it is like, everything gets bombed out. Even when you come out there and you would find nothing. Your house where you lived, and when you come from the area, the house isn't there no more. It's the rubbles, they're just the windows, and then if you have to still watch, they make you keep these people. They have people, working there with the. They keep you from it because the walls will crumble down on you. Walls will fall on you if you don't watch out, even though it's burning yet, because everything gets loose and then all of a sudden crash right on top of you, up there. So it's something they haven't experienced like that here. Like I says, in the east, if you go to the east, you will see actually what it's like to have still today. You'll have a lot of cannon, bullet holes, everything in walls yet. Bombed buildings you'll see today. It's not built.
Why haven't the East built back?
They built only certain areas, and they built houses, and a lot of it they took and they went to the Soviet Union, built themselves up and got into their factories and forget about the other places. They came first, and then comes the others, and so it took years, and they're building big high-rise houses there in the east. But a lot of these low ones in the blocks, you'll see, you go down the streets, it's still, and the plumbing is certain times of the day you have to shut off water because they have maybe one line running that was bombed out over there. So then that was the Soviets. The Americans now that were in Berlin now, there were Americans fighting in Berlin now, they did a different differently. They took where they were staying and they made a headquarters there, but they took already, like my brother-in-law, they took him captive, prisoner, he was about 14, 15, he was drafted and was fighting, and took him a prisoner there, and maybe about 4 months or so they released him right there, but it's but they kept them there. This was all of Berlin. But immediately as you came in, about a day when they stopped, and stuff, and they had a dividing line, so they and the Americans, it was an open field, and there it was, with a little gate on it, and there was the little house they set up maybe, and there was the Soviets, and the Americans were on the other side already. And if you didn't speak the Russian language, and by that time the Russians, and everybody, like I says, the women had a Russian baby, a lot of babies that time. Come to 1946, you find a lot of women with Russian baby. And the men came back and they found their wives in from the east. When the men came back and found things from the east, they found children of Soviet children in there. There was.
What the men do?
In the Soviets, they had to accept it. They had to accept it. They raised them. They made them raise them. So a lot of the German families still have Russian children. A lot of them, some of them send them to Moscow. Send these kids to Moscow to be raised. That's what they wanted to do to us during the war too. Since we traveled to one point and we come into Poznan, and the Russians stopped there and they came us and they got us into there. And when we did get in there, they found out that we were going back to Germany and they were giving us a rough time. We told them that we had relatives in the United States, in Chicago, and he says, where is my father? And I says, he's in Normandy. He's fighting in Normandy, and he says he couldn't do that. He couldn't let us go back, and he wanted to divide us. He wanted to divide some other countries, but not Germany. And he wanted to send my mom alone. My mom alone to Germany, and my brother, since he was in the Hayot there, I says in there, he wanted to send him over to Moscow, and he wanted to send me and my sister down someplace to South Africa. And said, when my mom kept crying, says, nope, I will not separate my kids, and we die here. He got real hard on us, and threatened if my mom did not cooperate, he will use and shoot her. And she stood by. He says, with my kids, I'm standing together, and this is where I will stay. And he says, nope, since you are Germans and going back, I am not gonna let you go, because under the some kind of, I don't know what the disagreement was. I still need to send him, and this boy here, he's got to go to Moscow, because he was indoctrinated by into the Hayot. See, most Americans think that the youth corps, that time was like the Boy Scouts. They think it's close to just like being in the Boy Scouts, and it's not. There was a complete difference. See, you did not volunteer. You did not volunteer to go there. You were drafted, and you were actually be prepared to go to a war, which is different here than the Boy Scout. And the other countries and them know of it. They know of it. They knew that, and they knew what it meant. So that's why they were giving them such a hard time. In Berlin, it was mainly known. Most every boy and every kid had to be in it, because Rommel, of course, he was the Befehlshaber of Berlin. He was the one. That was his brother, the general. That was his brother of the general, and every boy. See, that's why my brother-in-law was there too, and he was the one too in the Hayot. He was drafted in there, so you had to, because by the time you were, like I said, 15, 16, they got you in, and you were already partially into the Wehrmacht in there.
You mentioned that when you were born, they had a big celebration.
Yes, they did. See, I was born in Emmanuel's thing, because which was some relative of King Victor Emmanuel. Still, if you know, before World War I in there, and he came through that town and blessing, and his relative was there in a castle. Well, when the war broke out, they left that castle and made it into a hospital. Well, see, and they known, but still milk was hard to get, and for this thing. So my mom was carrying me. She did manage to get a little bit of milk, but not much. Anyway, in there, and finally I was brought up to that hospital there. I mean, to that castle, which was a hospital there, the only one. Well, when we left out of that camp, going into this was just going back a camp which was going back to the Germans. Germany, and when we left that that castle stood empty stood empty again. It was a big room of all these things. Well, in that camp, see, I was the first one, and a German, and the first boy in that effort. So finally they called, and a bunch of as far as my brother and my mom, German generals came by. They got a hall. a lot of soldiers came by. My dad got home, from because being a boy, and they had the Hayot. They had a German choir there, and everything in their uniforms, and registered me into their book of records there, and they said in there, since this is the honor of the camp, being the first boy, that he will be honored to go into the Wehrmacht when he gets been, or to be faithful to the fatherland of that stuff. And they asked him, what will he be called, and he gave the name Rudolph, and the drum and bugle corps, and they played and had a big celebration. They brought in, I don't know where they even got the food in. I mean, lots of food, and big tables were set, and there was one table set just for the high officers in one area, some generals.
Who was the highest officer there?
A generals. I have to ask my brother, because my brother remembers that he was in his Hayot uniform too, out there. Some big generals, several generals were out there, and of this thing out there, and it was in. And so my mom, after this day, got between the Germans, medicines, so it was always pretty. So you're the one with the sun, in there. But it didn't turn out that way. I'm here in the United States, and I was in the American Army. It's not that Facebook, but it was true that he will grow up and die, that I will die for the fatherland. That was the big deal, and I know I was recorded in their records there, the German records up there.
Now, where were you born?
Emanuelshagen. It is a place. It's been changed by the Eastern Germans there in East Germany, and I was born on the way going deep into West Germany. Say we were from Romania traveling into West Germany this time now.
And it was named after what king?
King Victor Emmanuel. It means the blessings. He gave the blessings.
Where was he from?
King Victor Emmanuel.
Is he from Italy?
Is it Italy, or is it some King Victor Emmanuel? I know he's a big king. So was a big king. I'll have to look that up too. I know anyway, but that's where he was from, and he came to that town and stayed in that town and everything, and gave the record. So they gave it Emanuelshagen. He liked it. He went hunting there quite often, so he liked it there, and that's what they got after it. And that castle there he stayed in, and his relatives had, but the war they left, and that castle stood empty. So then they made a hospital there, and they mostly what my area was when was with the East and the of course Soviets there. The Americans I've seen was after the war, and somewhere during, but not much in Berlin. Say the most when I was in Berlin we seen when they came through my town. See, because Helmstedt is not far from my town, Helmstedt, and it's the border town. And it's the last town, it's the last town before you go into the east toward Magdeburg, and that's all American now, and that's where most of the Americans when they was with British. The British who took my area, my town, and sometimes I've seen Americans and British out there, and they came through. But they came constantly in columns. I remember it was a day and night. One time they came in with lots of stuff. They had these spurts, nothing but American and British columns. If it wasn't British, Americans right behind them. And I got scared. I thought that was happening again, like I seen with the Soviet tanks, back there. So I ran inside the house. My mom grabbed me because you couldn't cross the street. It was just coming in like anything, and some of them, the Americans bivouacked, out in the field. There was American force. I remember the helmets and stuff and these high jackets there. And they came into the town, and we had the guest house, and I seen Americans, but they only stayed there maybe a couple of hours. They packed up and went toward Helmstedt. See, Helmstedt was the word. And Helmstedt now was board at that time before it really came official by women. Women carried their babies, Russian women, and had these heavy Soviet machine guns, and they were merciless. They fired on us. They shot at us. When they told you, see, they had just a little piece of wire, and they marched. They made these women guard with their babies, and when they went up there, for a while, they cut this area in half. When you walked on there, men, women, or child approached. They used these heavy Soviet knives and shot at you.
These are Russian women?
Russian women. in uniform. They came out. They told you to halt, to don't go past the point, because it was just a field, and it wasn't really, you didn't know where it was exactly, where the border was exactly. And if you went a little further, what they thought it was theirs, they just got that women out and shot no matter what crossed. So, so they told you in Russian, they started saying things. I don't know what they said, but they were firing at you, shooting at you.
Well, it's 2 o'clock.
Okay.
We'll have to continue later.
Tomorrow.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.